Hey, now we're finally caught up and welcome to the present where we're using HTML5 semantic elements in order to help organize our document content and also communicate to the browser the different meaning and the different sections of the code. So the semantic just means that it's easier to understand what the tag names are. So originally what we were doing is that we were creating divs, adding in classes such as header, navigation, articles, A-side, footer. So all of that was previously being done with web development, and then along came HTML5 and they allowed us to have more meaningful elements, and these are all still block elements, so they just behave the same way as divs. They're really interchangeable, but when you read the code, they have more meaning within the code. So when you are developing, it is encouraged that you use semantic elements in order to create sectioning within your content. So just as we have the body and the head section of the website, there's articles, there's sections, there's A-sides, there's navigation. So most websites will have a main navigation area because they'll have a main section, and a lot of them will have multiple columns on the side, so that it just be referred to as A-side, and then the styling takes care of the positioning and where we're going to set these. So no more tables, you don't have to look at those. Only use tables if you want to create something within a table format, so a two-dimensional representation of some data, and that's where you can be using tables. You don't have to worry about structuring tables and nesting tables into other tables, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. So we've got an example of how they typically work within sectional elements will work. So we've got the header, and then within the header area, the nav. So the header is at the top of the page. Then we've got the main section. The section might contain a few different articles. It might have a side column, and then the footer where we've got the copyright information, contact information, and this is the bottom of the page. So it's right at the bottom. And with nav, it's typically done within an unordered list and the list items. And this makes it more readable when you're looking at the code. And then along comes the styling, and this is where we style the navigation. So it doesn't anymore look like an unordered list. It will look like a navigation bar. So this is all taken care of by styling. So how about we try out and create some semantic elements within the page that we've been working with. So going into the top page, so what we want to do is we want to start out by basically having a header area. So anything that we might want to include into the header. So we've got this H1. So within the header, you typically would have possibly like a logo. So I create a div there. Logo, welcome to my site. And we also might have a navigation bar. And the navigation would be an unordered list of a bunch of list items that have a bunch of hyperlinks that are linking out to the different areas of our page. So we already still have that little website here that we built. So we've got the about area, and we'll have another list item that will be the index. And this just really makes it easier to read when you are going into your website. You can say, okay, well, this is a list, and within this list, I can see that this is a navigation. Then lastly, I've got my contact area. So let's just update the contact. So this would be typically contained within the nav bar. And then, as mentioned, with styling, that's how the styling would get applied. Then we close off the header. And then after the header, we might have a section that would contain some content. And this stuff is just suggested, so you typically could structure it any way you want. So the section would have the main content area. And then with styling, we might have an A-side to the side of the section. And this will, again, just get that block content. So this would be a side menu. And then lastly, let's add in the footer area. And let's refresh, save it. And we don't have any styling yet, so it's hard to distinguish between the different sections of the website, but this is typically how it would be done and how you would create a basic website. And you can also nest various elements within other elements to create even more structure. This is an example of nesting an article. And within the article, it's got a header It's got a section and a footer as well. Here's an example of a side. So it's an element that defines related content, but has different placement than the main content. And the main content, once again, we concluded it and added it under the main section area, just as they did within this example. So they do have a section, they have a heading for the section, and then they have an article, they have another article, and then lastly they have a side and then the section. So you could do that as well, where you could add the A sides into the sections, and we could wrap the main content within an article. And the only styling that's being applied by default to these elements is going to be the block styling. And then just before we close off the section, we're going to move the A side as well as the side menu in there. And right now they're all getting the block properties, so we don't see a whole lot of distinction. And then you would select these with styling and position them and move them where you need them on the page to display on the page. So go ahead and try this out. Create a heading, a navigation, an unordered list with a bunch of list items, and then a main section, content section area. Separate out two different columns where you could have potentially two different sections of content. So one is an article, one is an A side, and then finish it off with the footer area. And you're going to have a basic HTML structure that you can use when you start learning about styling, and then apply some styling to each one of these elements to position them on the page as needed.